Welcome to Biohacking with Brittany. Thank you for tuning into today's episode. I'm your host, Brittany, and I am a holistic nutritionist, content creator, podcaster, and new mama and biohacker of, I don't even know, maybe 7-8 years, something like that now. This is a place where I talk about health and wellness and the latest trends and news and bring on really exciting guests. And today I am doing a little bit of a biohacking in the news recap, some things that have kind of caught my eye, some headlines that I thought we should talk about. And I figured if it gets my attention, it probably will get your attention. And something that you may have heard of, these terms that are kind of being thrown around now. And we're just going to kind of dive in. And there's some of the hottest topics in wellness right now. And we are going to be exploring Ozempic Babies. What the heck does that mean? How does GLP-1 weight loss drugs impact pregnancy and fertility? I'm going to be talking about the recent FDA's ban on red number 3, which is a synthetic dye, and why that has happened, what it's linked to, its impact on our health. And then I'm going to talk about this word that I recently heard. It's called Globesity, which is all about the global obesity epidemic and why that's happening, what we can do about it, my personal experience and kind of seeing this around the world when I've traveled. And yeah, kind of like its relation to malnutrition and these like global epidemics and global problems that we're actually dealing with. I thought when I heard a different podcast talk about globesity, I thought it was really interesting. So we're going to touch upon that as well. But as always, before we get started, a shout out to Leela Quantum Tech, who recently came out with female underwear that protects you against EMF. Finally, I'm actually wearing a pair right now as I sit with my computer on my desk and my recording equipment around me in my house. So there has been a lot of research that shows that EMF actually impacts the ovaries, the eggs inside of our ovaries, all of our reproductive anatomy, but also how that relates to fertility, pregnancy, hormones, menopause, everything like that, because the ovaries actually do produce hormones up until menopause. So there's research that kind of like shows that high levels of EMF, 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, anything that's kind of plugged in, this like radiation can really, really impact how our ovaries function. And one way we can kind of mitigate that is by blocking the signals. And we can do that through underwear. And it's really hard to create underwear that is effective for women because a lot of the fabrics are too thick and are uncomfortable and not breathable. So it also has to be breathable, but it has to be comfortable and it has to actually still have enough silver in it that actually stops the radiation from going through. And Leela Quantum Tech has done that. And I'm so excited to be working with them on it. It's been a project and something I've been thinking about for a few years. And I'm really, really happy with how theirs have turned out. I have multiple pairs. So you can use my discount code Biohacking Brittany will get you an extra 10% off, even on the bundles. So if you buy 2 or more, it's discounted. And then my discount gets you more off, which we love. They have a couple of different styles, depending on if you want something more cheeky or full coverage. You can take a look at that. I have both. I will advise to size up. They do run really small. So for me, I got a size medium and I got a size large. Typically with underwear, even postpartum now, like I'd probably be a small, maybe a medium, but it is much more like form fitting. So I would definitely size up if you are trying these, which I highly recommend. I have a bunch of Leela's products actually like all over my house. So definitely check them out. I have their quantum block, multiple things that really just help with the frequency in the home, in your home, which is super important. And a shout out to Wellness. I'm actually having the founder come on my podcast and they produce a wide range of really healthy like products for your skin, hair, and oral mouth. I have their toothpaste. I have multiple ones from them. I love their kids one. I have their charcoal one. They have a mint one. They have multiple different ones that are really great. And it doesn't use any fluoride, doesn't use any synthetic chemicals or dyes or anything like that. It is one of the cleanest brands out there in terms of toothpaste. So that's Wellness. You can use my discount link and you will get 12% off of everything that they have, including their toothpaste. But also you could try like their deodorant or other things like that. And that is the brand by Katie Wells, who's known as Wellness Mama, who is wonderful. And so you can definitely trust her opinion, trust these products as much as I do. And I will link all of this in the show notes. You can go to my website, Biohacking Brittany. I have a new shop page up that's like nicely updated for you. And everything's linked there. So go check it out. Take a look. Do your thing. Every time you're buying a biohacking product, I always tell people, please look. Because most of the time I have a discount code and I can just save you some extra, dollars, which we love. All right, let's dive into this episode without further ado. Okay, Ozempic Babies. Have you heard this term? I've seen it on TikTok. I've seen it in a bunch of places. And it's this surprising connection between GLP-1 drugs and fertility. So how did this kind of come about? How did this rise of this term come about? The term Ozempic Babies has recently taken social media by storm. Women across platforms like TikTok are sharing surprising stories of pregnancies that occurred while taking the GLP-1 drugs, such as Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro. These medications, originally designed to manage type 2 diabetes and support weight loss, have also inadvertently become associated with unexpected fertility outcomes. Some women who have been told they were infertile are now reporting pregnancies after years of trying unsuccessfully. This phenomenon highlights how these medications, which improve metabolic health, can influence reproductive function in ways that even experts didn't fully anticipate. So how does this work? This works in kind of multiple ways. Obviously, there's no clinical data on this, right? It's all anecdotal right now, but there are kind of a couple pathways that we can see that why this might be occurring. So first of all, let's talk about how GLP-1 drugs affect birth control. So GLP-1 agonists work by slowing gastric emptying, which can impact how medications, including oral contraceptives, like the birth control pill, are absorbed. When contraceptives are not absorbed consistently, their effectiveness can be reduced, leading to higher rates of unintended pregnancies. Obviously, this is for the people who are not trying, who are just getting pregnant while taking this drug. According to endocrinologists, women using these medications should consider non-oral contraceptive options such as IUDs or implants to avoid surprises. You could also do the natural method, which is tracking your cycle with an app like Natural Cycles. You could use the calendar method. There's multiple natural ways that you can track your cycle in order to avoid or get pregnant. I have used the Natural Cycles app for years by taking my temperature every single morning, tracking my cycle, knowing when I'm ovulating, and avoiding unprotected sex during that time. In addition to affecting birth control, some women taking GLP-1 drugs report changes in menstrual cycles and improved hormonal balance, further contributing to increased fertility. The implications are significant, particularly for those relying on hormonal contraceptives without realizing the reduced efficacy while on these medications. So the hormonal impact here is something that is separate from its impact on birth control. When we think of hormones that are not balanced correctly, before we get into sex hormones, before we look at progesterone and estrogen, we need to swim upstream and take a look at our blood sugar hormones, things like insulin, and how that is operating in relation to the food that we're eating and our lifestyle. So if we're taking a drug like a GLP-1 and we are slowing down how the body is emptying and digesting food and we're impacting metabolism, that's obviously going to have a positive effect on insulin. When we're able to balance insulin, when we're able to have more of a regular normal, quote unquote, normal, response to the food we're eating, to the lifestyle that we're leading, obviously that is then going to impact our other hormones, including progesterone, estrogen, the delicate balance between both of those throughout the menstrual cycle, and obviously other hormones as well, cortisol, testosterone, things like that. But blood sugar hormones are so important and really do have a trickle-down effect to all of our other hormones. So when we're able to balance them, regulate them through taking a drug like this, obviously it's going to have an impact on every single hormone at bay. Now, how does that impact you being able to get pregnant? If you are someone who is dealing with irregular cycles, maybe you're not ovulating. Obviously, we need ovulation to be able to get pregnant. That is how that kind of, again, trickles down into how the menstrual cycle is working and is able to you are able to get pregnant and to sustain pregnancy through that, is through balancing those hormones and supporting the ovaries, which partly produce the hormones, and it kind of trickling down into this whole full system body approach that is happening. Weight loss and fertility is also a part of this as well. So weight loss is a key factor. I really don't want to just leave it out of the equation, because obviously a lot of people / many women with obesity or polycystic ovary syndrome, which is PCOS, experience hormonal imbalances that disrupt ovulation. By helping women lose even a modest amount of weight, as little as 5%, GLP-1 drugs can regulate menstrual cycles and restore ovulation. This metabolic improvement explains why women who previously struggled with infertility might suddenly find themselves pregnant. So not only does it have this impact on hormones, which then helps us ovulate better and helps us get pregnant and then sustain pregnancy, the weight loss in itself actually does that as well. So it's another pathway that this GLP-1 can really impact fertility and pregnancy. Weight loss as well also reduces inflammation and reduces insulin resistance, two factors that often contribute to reproductive challenges. However, these drugs are not a fertility treatment, and their impact on reproductive hormones requires further study, as I said previously. Research also suggests that restoring ovulation through weight loss could improve the success rates of assisted reproductive technologies like IVF, which is another way that this can help. There are some risks that I do want to touch upon before I add my, 2 cents to this. The FDA and healthcare providers strongly recommend discontinuing GLP-1 medications at least 2 months prior to trying to conceive. This timeline allows the drug's active ingredients, like semaglutide, to fully clear from the body. Animal studies suggest potential risks to fetal development, including structural abnormalities and early pregnancy loss, which underscores the need for caution. For women who become pregnant while on these medications, stopping immediately and consulting a healthcare provider is crucial. The lack of comprehensive human data leaves many questions unanswered, and medical supervision is essential to mitigate these risks. Additionally, women who are breastfeeding should avoid these medications, as there is insufficient data on their effects on milk production in infants. The broader implications for women's health should also be talked about here. The Ozempic Babies phenomenon sheds light on the broader implications of using GLP-1 drugs in women of childbearing age. Beyond improving fertility, these medications highlight the intricate connections between metabolic health, reproductive function, and medication absorption. Healthcare providers must offer thorough counseling to women considering these treatments, ensuring they understand both the benefits and potential risks. So my 2 cents here is that I think that the rise of GLP-1s is going to continue. I don't think that is going to stop anytime soon. And I think that the risks associated with this for fertility are a little scary. I see multiple people online talking about the early pregnancy loss, the abnormalities that can happen with a baby. And you have to ask yourself, if you are thinking about taking this drug for fertility, even if it's through losing weight for fertility or hormonal balance and then for fertility, if that's like your ultimate goal, is it worth it if you are going to have an increase in the odds of having early pregnancy loss or your baby not developing normally or fully or correctly or whatever word you want to use? In my opinion, it's not. Let's have a quick real talk about something many of us don't think about enough: protecting our reproductive health from EMFs. EMFs, which are electromagnetic fields, are around us everywhere, from our phones to Wi-Fi, 5G towers, and even household electronics. But did you know that EMFs can impact sensitive areas of the body, including your ovaries? As women, protecting this vital part of our health is so important, especially if you are planning for your future, thinking about fertility, or maybe any other health issues or concerns you have with your ovaries. That's where Lila Quantum Tech's women's underwear comes in. This is no ordinary underwear, okay? It's infused with pure quantum energy and woven with silver fibers to block over 99% of measurable radiation, including 3G, 4G, and 5G signals. It's like giving your body and your ovaries a protective shield against harmful EMFs while staying comfortable and stylish. Lila Quantum Tech has created something truly special: durable antimicrobial underwear designed with your health and well-being in mind. Whether you prefer brief or bikini style, these are an absolute must for anyone looking to prioritize their reproductive health, which I know so many of us are. And here's the best part: you can get 2 pairs for $77 or 4 pairs for $149. And if you use my discount code biohacking Brittany, you actually get a 10% discount on top of that bundle deal. So seriously, use it so you can save. Your health is worth it. Head to the link in my bio, on my show notes, on my website, and start to protect yourself today, starting from the inside out. Lila Quantum Tech, science meets self-care for every single part of you. I think you have to be really, really careful with these things. I think you have to be really careful in general when taking it. And I think there's so much more that we can do for fertility than, using a drug like this. Obviously, I have my baby steps program and my protocol, which is a very holistic, natural way to help you and your partner conceive and sustain pregnancy and have a very healthy baby. That's where I stand. That's what I believe. And that's what, everyone in my protocol believes as well. And I think it's just way more aligned with like the biohacking world versus, hey, let's take this drug and suppress my metabolic health and change my metabolic health. And then I'm going to get all of these benefits, quote unquote, that are going to come. It's also just like putting kind of like a Band-Aid approach on things rather than looking at the root cause of why are you struggling with weight in the first place? Why are you having metabolic issues in the first place? Why is fertility something that is infertility or fertility struggles is something that you are going through? Again, there's so much we can do for all of that. It just requires a lot of effort, education, self-discipline, and the willingness to actually put in the work day in and day out to be able to get those results. And I think that's why we see such a boom of a drug like this, is because it's so much easier for you to just take a drug every single day and potentially get these benefits. But on the flip side of that is that the risks are so much higher. So much higher. Again, I think this trend is going to continue. I would be very cautious if you are somebody who is taking any of these drugs at all. I do think they have a place in society, but I think they're overprescribed, overused, and also very expensive. I was listening to a podcast that was talking about them. I think it's like $1,000 a month to be on it if you're in the States. And that is wild. I also think it's really interesting just in general with Ozempic is I'm pretty sure the drug is made in Norway, but it's banned for the people in Norway to actually take it. So they produce it there and then they ship it worldwide, probably mostly to the States. And then they charge a fortune for it in the States. But the country that produces it doesn't allow its people to take it, which makes me question why. What is going on there? I think that's such a red flag. Such a red flag. And in general, countries like Norway, Sweden, those European countries are so healthy. And you can see it in the data. Like they're so healthy. They are the fittest. They sleep the best. They have the lowest stress. They have the best fertility rates. Like all of the data that comes out of countries like that is remarkable. So one piece of the puzzle is obviously medications and if they're using them or not. So I think that's just something to say. So let me know what you think about Ozempic Babies. I'm super curious if that is a term that you have used, if you are seeing it kind of, trend, and if you're curious about it as I was. All right, moving on to the next topic that I am seeing in the news a lot very, very recently is the FDA's ban on red number 3, a long overdue action. And hopefully this is just the beginning. So red number 3, also known as erythrosine, is a synthetic dye derived from petroleum. Yeah, that's right. Petroleum. It's been a staple in the food industry for decades, lending its bright cherry hue to candies, cereals, beverages, baked goods, lots of things for children, and much more. And despite being banned in cosmetics since 1990, due to its carcinogenic properties, it has continued to be used in food and beverages, a regulatory paradox that has frustrated consumer advocacy groups for years. Obviously, how does that make sense? If we're banning this in the makeup that we're using, but yet it's okay for us to ingest it and it's okay for our children to ingest it is wild. So there are multiple health risks associated with this red number 3. And it has honestly been well documented. Studies from as far back as the 1980s have revealed that the dye caused tumors in male rats exposed to high doses. More recently, concerns have extended to its potential behavioral effects in children, including hyperactivity and irritability. These findings prompted advocacy groups like the Center for Science in the Public Interest to petition the FDA to remove it from the food supply. That's really interesting. I know a couple of different families who have kids who are on the neurodivergent scale, or have ADHD or are autistic, and different ages actually. And they all avoid food dyes because of the hyperactivity that it causes and that they've seen firsthand their kids react to. Dr. Peter Lurie, who is the president of the Center for Science in the Public Interest, highlighted the absolute absurdity of the situation, which I just alluded to. And he said, at long last, the FDA is ending the regulatory paradox of red number 3, being illegal for use in lipstick, but perfectly legal to feed children in the form of candy. Amen to you. This is a landmark decision and just happened as of January 2025 right now. The FDA has announced this ban in food products, giving manufacturers until January 2027 to reformulate. That is something to be very aware of, especially if you have kids or if you eat any of these synthetic foods or processed foods. Just because it's been banned right now, it's actually going to take 2 years to fully come out of circulation, and for those companies who use it to now use something else. So don't think that you can go and buy Skittles suddenly and think it's okay. Not that, a lot of you would, but just be in mind that this is the first step, but it will take time to trickle down into what we're actually seeing in the supermarkets and the grocery stores, convenience stores, things like that. This decision marks a significant victory for consumer health, though many argue it should have come decades earlier. The ban also raises questions about other synthetic dyes, obviously, like red number 40 and yellow number 5, which have been linked to similar health concerns. Consumer advocacy groups see the FDA's decision as a turning point. And Melanie Benish, who is the vice president of the Environmental Working Group, the EWG, stated, "This ban sets a precedent for reevaluating other harmful food additives and protecting public health." Yes, it really does. The industry implications and consumer choices of this are obviously important as well. The food industry now faces the challenge of reformulating thousands of products. While some companies have already transitioned to natural colorants like beet or paprika extracts, others must invest time and resources to comply with the ban. For consumers, the ban serves as a reminder to scrutinize ingredient labels and opt for products with natural or organic certifications. I think there is something to note here is like, obviously there is a bit of an environmental concern with this. And like the question of food waste does come to mind of, okay, this has to be out of regulation within 2 years. So everything that's made with that, will that be consumed in the next 2 years, or is there going to be a ton that's thrown out? I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure about the shelf life for a lot of these products. I don't know what that looks like, but that is something that comes up. Mind you, things like natural colorants like beet extract, I've seen everywhere. I've used it myself when, you paint Easter eggs with different colored, natural color, things like that. Now that I'm getting into like baby and kid recipes, I use like spirulina for green and blue colors. So it's a very common thing. And it's awesome to kind of see this idea of using nature to color things in a much more healthier way and easier for us to digest. And obviously not an ingredient that causes, mental or emotional dysregularity. California and several other states have already taken steps to ban red number 3 before the FDA's announcement, signaling a broader shift towards cleaner food standards. Countries in the European Union, as well as Australia and Japan, have long restricted or banned the dye, leaving the US playing catch up. I feel like the US is always kind of playing catch up with these things. However, I will say Canada has still not banned it, and it is still allowed in Canada right now. Apparently, Health Canada said, the long-term effects aren't as serious if you have it in small amounts, is what I read. So Canada, we have not, unfortunately, seen much success yet. However, Canada is very strongly influenced by the US. So I do think, hopefully, sometime this year, we can kind of see this hit us as well to make healthier decisions for us and our families. The ban also underscores the growing demand for transparency in food production. As consumers become more health conscious, they are increasingly seeking out products free of synthetic additives. This trend could accelerate the adoption of cleaner ingredients across the food industry. Absolutely. I think it's super important to learn to read labels, food labels. Now, that might sound silly because you think, a food label, like obviously I know how to read it. But a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't understand what food labels mean, and they don't actually look at the ingredients. They might read like the macronutrients, or not even that. Like they might just read the calories, right? But it's really important to read the calories, read the fat content, the type of fat, the protein, the carbohydrates. Sure, you could read the vitamins and minerals as well. But then when you get to the ingredient part, it's actually really important to read all of those ingredients. The more ingredients there are, typically, the less healthy it is because the more processed it is. And the more ingredients in there that you don't understand, that are hard to pronounce, that you don't know what that necessarily means, chances are it's not healthy for you. Chances are it's made in a lab, it's synthetic, and it's not the greatest thing for you. And it might have risks, health concerns, that type of thing. Red number 3 and other food colorants can have multiple names. So if you see something that has the word red in it and you're like, oh, I wonder what that is, chances are it's food dye, just written in a very different way. So just be very conscious of that. And the other thing with what I don't think a lot of people know is like with the ingredient list, it is listed from the most abundant ingredient to the least. So if you're reading that list and say like cane sugar is the second thing that's on that list, that means that that is the second most abundant ingredient in that recipe, in that food product. It doesn't mean like, oh yeah, there's a little bit in there. Oh, and then further down, I get to ingredient number 10 and it says spirulina. Oh, okay, great. There's a lot of spirulina in this. No, that's not how it works. It goes from most to least. So we really want to see those sugars or preservatives or anything that we are kind of like trying to avoid really at the end of the list. And at the beginning, we want to see things that are more whole foods, nutrient dense, that type of thing. So, I mean, good job, FDA. High five. Nice to see you joining the European Union and Australia and Japan. Canada, hopefully you're next. This is your, little wake up call from your neighbors down south that like, we need to do the same thing over here. And hopefully this is just the beginning of kind of moving to a place where everything's dyed a bit more naturally and these are taken out of the food that we're eating. Toothpaste. We all need it and use it daily, but have you ever read the ingredients of your toothpaste or noticed the FDA poison warning on there? If not, keep on listening for some surprising information that your dentist might not be sharing with you. Fluoride has long been a common ingredient in many commercial toothpastes, hailed for its ability to prevent cavities. However, recent studies have raised concerns about the potential health risks associated with fluoride exposure. These risks include thyroid dysfunction, dental fluorosis, skeletal fluorosis, and potential neurotoxicity. Given these concerns, wellness offers a safer alternative that doesn't compromise our health, yet remains effective. Why choose wellness toothpaste? It is founded by wellness mama Katie Wells, and wellness is dedicated to natural health and uses hydroxyapatite instead of fluoride, a game changer in oral care. Here's why it is a better choice. It's fluoride free, eliminating all the health risks that I just talked about. The natural hydroxyapatite formula strengthens enamel and whitens your teeth. Plus, it's crafted from natural ingredients, gentle on gums, and eco-friendly. I love it. I use it all the time. I love the taste of it. And I don't think I will switch to anything else. So make the switch for yourself today to wellness toothpaste. Visit wellness.com and use code biohackingbrittany for 12% off your order. That's wellness spelled WELLNESSE.com. Safeguard your health with wellness because your smile deserves the best. Okay, next, globesity. So I want to preface this with, I don't think I've talked about this much, but I did my undergrad studies. I did a degree in political science and globalization, and as well as like public health was kind of like my specialty. So the idea of globalization is something that has been very, very interesting to me for a very long time. And when I was kind of looking at this idea of globesity, it really sparked my interest in globalization again. And globalization in general is kind of this idea of how are the different countries and different peoples around the world impacting each other, even though we're not necessarily in close proximity? How are cultures kind of becoming a melting pot, as they say? And how are we adopting certain things from certain cultures? What does that look like? And there's so many different facets of it. Public health and global health is a massive part of that. And globesity, which is global obesity, definitely goes into that. So there is a global obesity epidemic. This is a growing crisis. I first heard this word globesity on a recent podcast. I think it was one that Goop put out. And again, it sparked my interest and I was like, oh, I'm going to research this, look into this. So definitely something that we're talking more and more about. Obesity has become one of the most pressing public health challenges of our time, affecting over 13% of the global population as of 2016. That was 9 years ago now. That was 9 years ago. I do not think it's gone down in 9 years. If anything, it's probably significantly more than 13%. Dubbed globesity, this epidemic is not confined to industrialized nations. In fact, developing countries are experiencing rapid increases in obesity rates due to urbanization, changing diets, and reduced physical activity. I want to touch on this for a second. First of all, just as a side note, the language around countries, if you're still saying first world and third world, that's not how I, refer to countries anymore. That's kind of been out of the way, out of the language for the last like a decade, I would say. So now it's more of developed versus developing countries. And that's how you kind of differentiate the two. Even this is saying like industrialized versus developing. So when I say developing, 10 years ago, we would have said a third world country. Now we don't use that language anymore. It's kind of offensive, makes sense. I kind of saw this firsthand. I've seen this firsthand in a couple places, but a big place that I saw this was in Fiji when I was there in 2018. And I was there for 2 weeks. I stayed at a home with a family and I helped volunteer at a school. And I was served like their local food, which was amazing. A lot of cassava, which is a root vegetable, and it is served there and grows locally. It's very starchy, but it was actually really nice, very fresh. And I remember actually talking to the mom and the woman of the house, and we were kind of talking about this without, these words, globesity, this type of thing. And she was saying, so she had a house on this little school, this like elementary primary school. And every day, you would see these like kids line up at the tuck shop to buy chips and candy and Coke and, all these processed foods. And she would talk to me about like, hey, we had this traditional diet of things like cassava root. And then urbanization, industrialization, the American standard American diet has kind of seeped into the Fijian culture and is now sold at a very cheap price to kids and families. They're now choosing those foods over the cultural norm foods that we were once eating that were much more nutrient dense and healthier for you. And now you're seeing these people struggle with obesity, struggle with weight gain, even children and that type of thing. And we had a whole discussion about it multiple times. And the increase as well in Fiji of type 2 diabetes is actually very significant. And there's a lot of people actually working down there to help with that. And it is in relation to this industrialization of food, this processed food coming into the country and just completely overriding their traditional culture, their traditional dishes and meals, and then people not knowing about it, not understanding it, and not to their own fault, but just the lack of education around processed food and eating healthy, and then dealing with the health impacts of type 2 diabetes, gaining weight, insulin, metabolic issues, hormonal issues, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that example of Fiji is actually happening in many, many places. I saw this in Tanzania when I was working in Tanzania in 2015. I was there. Same thing in a very different way. And the tricky part about this is that it is a systemic, multifactorial issue. It is not something that can just be quickly fixed. It is not something that has one root cause. There's a lot of issues around it. It is a political issue as well as a health issue. And when you make processed food so cheap and you're in a country where the people are not paid fairly for the work that they're doing, obviously they're going to go to McDonald's to feed their family on $5 versus going to the local supermarket, buying all the groceries, cooking that meal at home, spending time cooking it, nourishing their family in that way. Same thing applies to America and Canada, right? It's so much easier to go through a drive-through on the way home from a soccer game than it is to have woken up earlier, prepared food that is sitting in a crock pot, waiting for you and your family to come home at the end of the day. It's cheaper. It's less time. It's less energy from the parents. So my point is that this idea of globesity is again, I'll say it, multifactorial, systemic problem that is not the individual's fault. Now, if you're hearing this and you're thinking, when I say not the individual's fault, I especially mean that for these people in these developing countries. If you're hearing this and thinking, no, it's their fault, they should know better, they should choose organic produce, and how dare they drink Coke with every meal, that is coming from a place of access and privilege and not necessarily understanding the systemic issues that they are currently dealing with and what they're faced with. And also just like the lack of education that they might have, the impacts of these food. So I don't know, at the government level and at the public level and at the business level, even from these businesses that are going into these countries, there's a lot that they are doing to make this super cheap, super addictive, and filling and marketing again towards these families that are struggling with this. So the multifaceted causes of globesity are complex. So the first one is processed foods. So, these processed foods that I'm talking about are high calorie, nutrient poor foods that have created an obesogenic environment. Next up is economic inequality. Food subsidies and marketing practices disproportionately target low-income communities where unhealthy options are often the most accessible, which is what I was talking about. Next up, we have sedentary. I can never say that word. Oh my God. For a podcaster, sometimes I really can't speak. Lifestyles. Urbanization and technological advancements have reduced opportunities for physical activity. And globalization. Social and economic globalization has increased exposure to these obesogenic diets and lifestyles. So think about social media, think about media in general, movies, TV shows, all of that type of thing, where you see these like famous people potentially, eating eating KFC. I don't know what it is, whatever they're eating, pizza, I don't know. And then these people all over the world are thinking, oh yeah, great, this person does this, so I should do this too. And that's happening more and more because of the technology that we have, because of social media and, being exposed to these different ways of eating and these lifestyles. Studies show that the social aspects of globalization, such as increased media consumption and cultural exchanges, play a significant role in spreading unhealthy dietary habits. A 2021 study found that a 1 standard deviation increase in social globalization led to a 13.7 rise in obesity rates. Increasing globalization in general, again, our access to each other across the world, led to a 13.7% rise in obesity rates. Wild. What else has it led to is the question for me. And then we have the role of policy and education. So efforts to combat globesity require systemic change. The World Health Organization has called for comprehensive strategies that include taxing sugary beverages, restricting junk food marketing to children, promoting public health campaigns that emphasize the importance of balanced nutrition and regular exercise. However, these measures alone are not enough. As one researcher, which I was reading about, said, the structural environment changes resulting from economic policies and food industry practices have made escaping obesity difficult for many populations. So then we have to talk about treatment and prevention. What are the innovations? What's happening? Biohacking, has a place here, and it offers new opportunities to address obesity through personalized health strategies, wearable devices, continuous glucose monitors, and metabolic testing can empower individuals to make informed decisions about their health. However, these tools must be part of a larger societal shift that addresses the root causes of obesity. Additionally, medical interventions like GLP-1 drugs that I was previously talking about and bariatric surgery have shown promise for individuals with severe obesity. These treatments, combined with behavioral therapy and lifestyle changes, offer a more holistic approach to weight management. Recent advancements in nutritional science are also shedding light on the role of the gut microbiome in obesity. Probiotic supplements like pendulum and dietary interventions aimed at restoring gut health could become key components of future obesity treatments. The hard thing with this is that even though biohacking has its place here, medical interventions have its place. A lot of this is really hard to have access to these people in these countries. It's expensive. And it's not even the expensive part. Like that's one component of it, but it's also finding practitioners, finding the drugs. Where do you buy a continuous glucose monitor in Fiji? Like, how do you have access to that? Right? So the accessibility is a big, big issue here. So while there are innovations, unfortunately, like, I don't know. I don't think that is the go-to solution for this. I think the solution will have to come from the large players like the government in these different nations. And then I also think a solution would be to kind of return to your roots, return to the family cooking methods and meals and family recipes and things that are rooted in the different crops and vegetables and fruit and meat and everything that's local to that country that have been prepared for years and years and years and years, that are nutrient dense, that culture has actually been eating, would be a very great and good solution compared to, hey, everyone wear a continuous glucose monitor and let's learn about that. That can also be, they both can exist, both can be true, both can happen at the same time. But I think this return to how people were once cooking and what they were cooking seems like something more accessible and affordable for the average person. Globesity is not just a health crisis, it's a societal challenge that requires collaboration across sectors. Governments, healthcare providers, and individuals must work together to create environments that support healthier lifestyles. Addressing the stigma around obesity and promoting evidence-based treatments will be key to turning the tide on this epidemic as well. And then public awareness campaigns must also shift the narrative around obesity, emphasizing that it is a complex condition influenced by various factors rather than simply a lack of willpower. Again, I think that is so, so important, especially in developing nations. By fostering empathy and understanding, we can build a more inclusive and effective approach to tackling the global crisis. In today's episode, we explored 3 critical health topics making headlines right now. From the unexpected pregnancies linked to Ozempic to the long overdue ban of dye red number 3, and the urgent need to combat globesity, it's clear that informed decisions and systemic changes are essential for a healthier future. Thanks for tuning in to Biohacking with Brittany. Be sure to subscribe. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify. I'm also on YouTube. And please join the conversation on social media. I love seeing how many of you are engaging on my content. My DMs are always open. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And I will see you next week for another episode. Thanks for listening to another episode of Biohacking with Brittany. If you're interested in finding the show notes or the sponsors for this episode, you can do so on my website, which is biohackingbrittany.com. Remember to follow me on Instagram, where I'm most active. My handle is @biohackingbrittany. And if you're interested in working together and you want to email me directly, you can do that. My email is info@biohackingbrittany.com. And I look forward to hearing from you and having you tune in next week.